All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Paradigm Podcast. We hope you're having a good week. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing aphorisms 204 to 208. And it comes from Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. It's a new chapter titled We Scholars. So I do want to open it up before we get into individual aphorisms. What do you guys think of it so far?
I like it. It's a lot more word heavy and the longer aphorisms in this one. I was a little confused what he was starting off with, but I'm getting the flow now of his critiquing of the the terms the objective person, the skeptic, the scholar, the genuine philosopher. He's just going in on the actual I don't know if you call them individual personifications, but yeah, I like it so far.
Yeah, it's a good read. It's definitely word heavy.
Oh yeah,
I find myself getting lost in just the deep, how he's the way the words are put together. I'm can't even keep up sometimes.
Dude, I was reading at one point. I was like, all right, I'm gonna stop at the end of this sentence because I got to use the restroom real quick. I was reading and I was like, God damn, yeah, it was a little bit tough of a read. I'm interested to hear, John, how you're reading it? You know how you said Crime and Punishment is a play. Is there a way you're reading this one? Is there anything special that's helping you out?
Yeah, we've talked about this. For the whole book or just for this chapter?
This chapter.
Just the same thing, Yeah.
I like the metaphor of you're just being Nietzsche's driving the car and you're in the backseat just listening to him rant. Yeah. He's just,
Yeah. This one was just a little bit tougher for me, so I'll be interested to hear what you guys have.
Okay.
So, who wants to start with 204?
I got it. All right. Well, let me lock in and get the fruit of cigarette. All right. Now, Prism 204. At the risk that moralizing may also reveal itself here as that which it has always been, namely, resolutely, Montrere se plice, according to Balzac, I would venture to protest against an improper and injurious alteration of rank, which quite unnoticed and is, if with the best conscience, threatens nowadays to establish itself in the relations of science and philosophy. I mean to say that one must have the right, out of one's own experience as it seems to me always implies unfortunate experience, to treat of such an important question of rank, so as not to speak of color like the blind, or against science like women and artists. Ah, this dreadful science, sigh their instinct and their shame. It always finds things out. The declaration of independence of the scientific man, his emancipation from philosophy, is one of the subtler after effects of democratic organization and disorganization. The self-glorification and self-conceitedness of the learned man is now everywhere in full bloom, and in its springtime, which does not mean to imply that in this case self-praise smells sweet. Here also the instinct of the populace cries, freedom from all masters. And after science has, with the happiest results, resisted theology, whose handmaid it had been too long, it now proposes in its wantonness and indiscretion to lay down laws for philosophy, and in its turn to play the master. What am I saying? To play the philosopher on its own account. My memory, the memory of a scientific man, if you please, teems with the naiveties of insolence which I have heard about philosophy and philosophers from young naturalists and old physicians, not to mention the most cultured and most conceited of all learned men, the philologists and schoolmasters, who are both the one and the other by profession. On one occasion, it was the specialist and the Jack Horner who instinctively stood on the defensive against all synthetic tasks and capabilities. At another time, it was the industrious worker who had got a scent of otium and refined luxuriousness in the internal economy of the philosopher, and felt himself aggrieved and belittled thereby. On another occasion, it was the color blindness of the utilitarian, who sees nothing in philosophy but a series of refuted systems and an extravagant expenditure which does nobody any good. At another time, the fear of disguised mysticism and of the boundary adjustment of knowledge became conspicuous. At another time, the disregard of individual philosophers, which had involuntarily extended to disregard of philosophy generally. In fine, I find most frequently, behind the proud disdain of philosophy in young scholars, the evil after effect of some particular philosopher, to whom on the whole obedience has been forsworn, without, however, the spell of his scornful estimates of other philosophers having been got rid of, the result being a general ill will to all philosophy. Such seems to me, for instance, the after effect of Schopenhauer on the most modern Germany. By his unintelligent rage against Hegel, he has succeeded in severing the whole of the last generation of Germans from its connection with German culture, which culture, all things considered, has been an elevation and a divining refinement of the historical sense. But precisely at this point, Schopenhauer himself was poor, irreceptive, and un-German to the extent of ingenuousness. On the whole, speaking generally, it may just have been the humaneness, all too humaneness, of the modern philosophers themselves. In short, their contemptibleness, which has injured most radically the reverence for philosophy and opened the doors to the instinct of populace. Let it but be acknowledged to what an extent our modern world diverges from the whole style of the world of Heraclitus, Plato, Empedocles, and whoever else, all the royal and magnificent anchorites of the spirit were called, and with what justice an honest man of science may feel himself of a better family and origin. In view of such representatives of philosophy, who, owning to the fashion of the present day, are just as much aloft as they are down below. In Germany, for instance, the two lions of Berlin, the anarchist Eugene Düring and the amalgamist Edward van Harten. It is especially the side of those hodgepodge philosophers who call themselves realists or positivists, which is calculated to implant a dangerous distrust in the soul of a young and ambitious scholar. Those philosophers, at the best, are themselves but scholars and specialists. That is very evident. All of them are persons who have been vanquished and brought back again under the dominion of science, who at one time or another claimed more from themselves without having a right to the more and its responsibility, and who now creditably, rancorously, and vindictively represent in word and deed disbelief in this master task and supremacy of philosophy. After all, how could it be otherwise? Science flourishes nowadays and has the good conscience clearly visible on its countenance, while that to which the entire modern philosophy has gradually sunk, the remnant of philosophy of the present day excites distrust and displeasure, if not scorn and pity. Philosophy reduced to a theory of knowledge. No more, in fact, than a diffident science of epochs and doctrine, of forbearance, of philosophy that never even gets beyond the threshold and rigorously denies itself the right to enter. That is philosophy in the last throes, an end, an agony, something that awakens pity. How could such a philosophy rule?
Damn, boy. That's a mouthful. Those long ones, we probably should take intermissions and discuss the ideas.
Well, yeah. Kind of like, I like reading it all the way through and then picking like the spots that kind of like popped out, you know, after kind of general, you're kind of saying like what he's saying in brief, you know?
I do like reading the whole thing out through, because like you do just get to hear like the full thought, and then we can kind of take it. I feel like if you like pause here or whatever, it's like when you listen to a song, like you're like, you gotta listen to the whole thing, and then you can talk about like the different parts.
That's true. Yeah, when I was running through the ChatGPT kind of to get some assistance, it popped up 5 major ideas in this aphorism.
My favorite part of the thing is like kind of the midsection when he's talking about all the different like, I guess like ideologies maybe, where he's like, they're not even ideologies, it's like, but he's like utilitarianism, you know, philosophy, scientism, like stuff like that, you know, and like kind of like in his opinion, like where they fall short, like their critiques, I guess, where he's like the utilitarian one, he gets more into later. I guess all of them he gets more into later. So this is like a prelude of like what he's going to get into, you know?
Yeah. The interlude.
What's a prelude mean?
Oh, I don't know. Is it the prelude? Yeah, probably prelude.
Pre is before.
Right. Interlude would be after.
During.
Okay. And then what's after? Encore?
Encore. Postlude. For after.
Yeah. When I was reading this, like, it's almost better for me to like read it really slow and just kind of go through the whole thing, you know, and then come back and like be like, all right, like, what are the main points and what I think he's trying to say, and then from all of our videos, we've been using ChatGPT to help us, but I think it does make me understand kind of like, all right, like what's he trying to say? How using the examples, and then like I'll go back and find examples like, all right, he's talking about this with the utilitarianism.
I'm going for it.
Utilitarianism is again. I had ChatGPT had some.
Just go through the whole thing, not even from the utilitarianism. Just like read us through how you go through it.
So the first major idea is the misplacement of rank between science and philosophy. So he critiques the rise of science at the expense of philosophy.
And then it's science.
Yeah, there's an inversion of the two. So while philosophy was like the superior scholar, now scientists have assumed that role, and he's hiding the switch in that. And so he argues that science should be a tool, a subordinate tool. And now it seems to dictate the terms of philosophy. He sees this as a dangerous overreach. So, and that's due to the democratic and leveling tendencies where everybody's got to be equal.
And not just that, like science is in itself maybe utilitarian, or it's just like, this is this, and like, this is like how you use it. These are the pros and cons to it. Like, but there's no like higher level principles behind science. You're just organizing what's going on. And he's like, well, that's a bad way. If that's your North Star, there's no like higher principles.
All right, let's see.
It'd be like, it's like you got a good vehicle, but you got a bad driver. You actually got no driver, You
just know the rules of how the vehicle works.
You could even have like a real, you have like a really good vehicle, but it's like, well, what's that good for?
There's no direction in that.
Right.
Yeah. So the philosopher, originally, like the things that created science, the reasons for them was a question. Like some philosophers sat there and started with a question, and then a scientist was like, well, how do we figure that out? And then they came up with metrics and ways to figure things out. And so now he's seeing that there's this flip going on where the philosopher isn't doing the direction anymore. Now it's just science. All right. So he takes aim at various kinds of scholars who despise philosophy. The utilitarian who sees no use in it. The narrow specialist who cannot think synthetically, whatever that means. The obedient student warped by a single dominant philosopher, and even scientists emboldened by public praise. So like the self-conceitedness he's talking about. He talks about Schopenhauer as having poisoned German academic philosophy with his bitter hatred of Hegel. And I don't really know too much about that story. So it leaves younger scholars that are in his camp arrogant, unphilosophical, and disconnected from the greatness of past thinkers. Okay. So ultimately, Nietzsche paints a grim picture. Philosophy is in its death throes. Once a discipline of nobility and creation is now something weak and pitiful. Damn. So he's about to get into all that. The state of philosophers.
Terrible.
It's horrible. Horrible. All right. 205. Do you have anything to add, guys?
I think it was just really interesting to think about like science as being it's all the like facts of the world, and then philosophy.
Oh, really?
Like the
I'm listening.
Philosophy is like the challenges of facts and meaning, but also like science isn't just like a neutral thing, because I wrote like scientists are ascribing a value judgment to their scientific conclusions that truth is worth pursuing. And I think Nietzsche is kind of like saying like, well, there is a like a I don't even know. I think I'm getting lost in the words now.
Nietzsche got your ass, boy.
I don't know. Fuck you, John.
Well, you're like, science is like, like facts. It's like, no, really? Like, that's like literally what it is,
John is Shane Gillis. Like, you get a new haircut or a leather jacket. He's like, oh, look at this guy over here.
Like, science is like facts of like, like science, like Earth,
It's bro
science.
John the bully, bro.
Fuck you, bully.
I'm just kidding. All right. We'll jump into 205. Anybody want to do this one? This one's one of the shorter ones.
You said short ones? All right. Log in. You read it? Yeah. All right. 205. The dangers that beset the evolution of the philosopher are, in fact, so manifold nowadays that one might doubt whether this fruit could still come to maturity. The extent and towering structure of the sciences have increased enormously, and therewith also the probability that the philosopher will grow tired even as a learner or will attach himself somewhere and specialize so that he will no longer attain to his elevation. That is to say, to his superstition, his circumcision, and his deposition. Or he gets aloft too late, when the best of his maturity and strength is past, or when he is impaired, coarsened, and deteriorated, so that his view, his general estimate of things, is no longer of much importance. It is perhaps just the refinement of his intellectual conscience that makes him hesitate and linger on the way. He dreads the temptation to become a dilettante. What is it?
Dilettante.
Dilettante, a millipede, a millennial tenor. I don't fucking know. A bug, maybe. He knows too well that as a discerner, one who has lost his self-respect no longer commands, no longer leads, unless he should aspire to become a great play actor, a philosophical calistotro, a spiritual rat catcher, in short, a misleader. This is in the last instance a question of taste. If it has not really been a question of conscience, to double one more the philosopher's difficulties, there is also the fact that he demands from himself a verdict, a yea or nay, not concerning science, but concerning life and the worth of life. He learns unwillingly to believe that it is his right and even his duty to obtain this verdict, and he has to seek his way to the right and the belief only through the most extensive, perhaps disturbing and destroying experiences, often hesitating, doubting, and dumbfounded. In fact, the philosopher has long been mistaken and confused by the multitude, either with the scientific man, the ideal scholar, or with the religiously elevated and decentralized, the desecularized, visionary, and God-intoxicated man. And even yet, when one hears anybody praised because he lives wisely or as a philosopher, it hardly means anything more than prudently and apart. Wisdom that seems to be populous to be a kind of flight, a means and an artifice for withdrawing successfully from a bad game. But the genuine philosopher, does it not seem so to us, my friends, lives unphilosophically and unwisely, above all imprudently, and feels the obligation and burden of 100 attempts and temptations of life. He risks himself constantly. He plays this bad game.
A lot of crazy words in there. Millie antenna.
Only because he said millipede the first word. I was like, is this a bug?
So, millie antenna is someone with an excessive number of interests or superficial engagement, hindering their ability to be a disciple.
So nowadays they call that ADHD. So back then he was like, we got ourselves a millie antenna over here. Your son's been diagnosed with millie antenna.
Yep. Yeah.
ADHD. Got it.
ADHD.
Oh, well, I don't know. What I got from the fiction was like, now those words kind of being more of a concrete understanding. The sentence prior, it's almost like he's like saying like this refinement of this intellect is not like he has to have a conclusive reasoning behind everything he's doing, but it's also led in like a morality sense of understanding. And it's not the science-based way. It's more of a what's right and wrong. And there has to be a conclusive end to everything that we understand. That's what like my take is.
That's how when he goes into the God intoxicated man part.
Well, just overall, just in general.
Lead us aside.
Okay. So the big idea I got without going to ChatGPT, right? It's like there's this notion now that the philosopher has to be like the scientist where they abide by rules and play safe. Mm-hmm. And what he's that a true, genuine philosopher, he's saying this at the end, a true, genuine philosopher, to that person, doesn't that sound crazy? To be a philosopher, you have to live unphilosophically, unwise, and imprudent.
You kind of have to be like a shaman, like people like on the fringes of society, and like the reason why the shaman can give you like good wisdom and stuff is because he's literally like living like, and he says the words like apart from like the rest of the world. Like the herd mentality like just doesn't suit him. So he's like almost cast aside. So like living a normal life is like almost impossible for this guy. So like how can this guy weigh in on like principles and higher value when he can't even like get along with like normal people, you know? But he's like at the same time, because this guy's living on the fringes of society, he's been very intimate with like the nuance of life, of like the things that aren't safe, the things that are like on the outside, actually, the things that we're afraid to talk about, you know, or afraid to think about. This weird guy. Yeah, it's Zarathustra. Or it's like every culture's had that. Like it used to be called like a shaman, you know, or it's like you're fucking like whatever, you know?
Rabbi.
Yeah, exactly. Like
priest, whoever.
Priest maybe not necessarily, but he does live apart from like the general people. Yeah.
Yeah. Does this character, the one we're identifying, do they usually try to find, like how he states, like are they trying to find a verdict in their philosophy or like their meaning of things?
Let's see. Okay, yeah. So he says here, to double once more the philosopher's difficulties, there is also the fact that he demands from himself a verdict, a yes or a no.
Yeah.
Not
that's why I asked that question.
Yeah. So that the philosopher that, you know, modern day philosopher that abides by rules, that really is a scientist, they demand an answer, right? Like we came up with a question, we had a hypothesis, we ran the experiment, there needs to be a conclusion, right? And we can have a discussion about what those results mean. But like he's talking about this, they're trying to do this concerning life and worth of life, right?
It's like, yeah, how can they be like a yay or nay? How can you quantify it?
Right.
Like we're talking about like nuance. So like philosophy is like past science because you can't quantify. Like there is no yay or nay. Like what we're talking about is like it's like in the fringes of like our conscience, like how we organize, like not the things that are like material, the things that are unmaterial, you know?
Yeah.
So like this guy, science is like almost like a weight to reality, you know? And he's like, sometimes you have to let go of the weight to like swim in the deep end. Or it's like, maybe it's like a floaty, you know? Or whatever. And he's like, sometimes you gotta let the floaty go because like there's cool shit over there, but you know, you gotta be willing to like let go of a year and just experience it.
Yeah, like everybody has their own like dynamic philosophy and how they conduct their life, you know? So like for you to say there's a yes or a no, there's a verdict in the end. When everybody operates on a different philosophy, it's not even, you're building on sand, you know?
And even, yeah, just like advising people sometimes, like people like ask me questions or like, what should I do or whatever. And it's like, dude, really, I have no idea, you know? Like there's really no right answer, you know? There's like a million different answers. There's like better decisions, maybe, you know? Maybe, but like, I don't fucking know. Who am I? I can tell you what I would do, but that's not like, that's for me. It's not for you.
Yeah. So, I want to talk about this bad game because
I was going to ask, yeah, what do you guys think that the bad game is?
When you guys first,
this is me, the bad game. And like, he talks about, does it not seem so to us, my friends, lives unphilosophically and unwisely, above all imprudently, and feels the obligation a burden of 100 attempts and temptations of life. That right there is like, I feel like, again, like the people that live more on the fringes, so like they're like freer to taste those nuances of like the beyond good and evil, you know? It's, people would say that's like unwise to live that way maybe, or like it would be an imprudent way to live. And like the obligations of like normal life are like very heavy for them. Like that's why like a lot of these priests and stuff, like some people think of them as like lazy because like they don't work, they don't produce anything, they get free money, people take care of them, and like all their time is just to like just think and pray. Like the burdens of normal life is too tough for them, you know? So, and like 100 attempts of temptation of life where like, it's like, if you're a free thinker, then like, just putting this out there, but like you could be like, well, why couldn't I just try heroin? You know, like, or like, because like, you know, it's a thing, you know, and like, that's just like a thing. You're like, someone who's like not afraid of nuance isn't afraid to like go see what's up for themselves, you know, but there's a lot of bad avenues, you know, like that's why like in a lot of ways they call like weed the gateway drug, because you're like, this is kind of cool. What else is cool? You know? And like, now you're not so scared to like do drugs now because like, you're kind of like, oh, what's over here? You know, like that's like the 1,000 like temptations of life. Like it could be like sex, food, like thinking with like a very bad doctrine. Like he was talking about with the students who get kind of like fully enclosed in like this fucking like ideology and they're passionate about it. You know, like that's another like temptation of life, you know? And like he plays this bad game of like what he's talking is like life, because like he talked about earlier, like the experience of the philosopher is almost like dreadful and like deteriorating. And like, yet he keeps playing this game. Like Jordan Peterson says, like, despite it all, you try again. Like, that's what like recognizing what life is like understanding that like there's a lot of good, but there is a lot of bad, and you can't change that. But despite it all, you still try again.
Yeah, the bad game, I think, starts like let's say the philosopher is in the role of a scientist where you've designed an experiment. Once you are talking about leaving that experiment is now the bad game, right? So I think being a good person is to be a Christian 100% through and through, right? If you conduct yourself and there's a good game that you can play, if you never dabble in the bad game, you don't learn about some of the things in life is kind of what I think he's talking about. Like, they're so structured, they refuse to leave their rails and play the bad game to learn and develop it a little bit more. So like John's saying, life, like indulging with life. And so now instead of like, it's not so rigid, it's gray area, nuance, like John's saying, like you have to be able to play the bad game because like he's saying, philosophy now is seen as living an experience, right? I think he says in the beginning.
A lot of it's like time and place too. Like, for example, like I smoked a ciggy on the weekend, and like on my first day with this chick, I ended up smoking a cig, and I was like, "Do you care?" Which if she did, I'd probably be like, "Well, I don't know if we can like do this because like I don't know, maybe I want to cig sometimes,
Horsey on it,
and she didn't care, but she said something like, like take the time and place, and I was like, yeah, it's not like I would like light up a jack in front of your parents or whatever, it's like that would be like the experience of life, the nuance of life. It's like, would I smoke a cig in front of like my parents? Maybe. I feel like maybe, but probably not, but maybe. But it's like when and where, when and where.
Yeah, I remember my dad having that conversation with me as a kid, being like, there's a time and a place. That was our whole conversation. It was like, assess, is it the time? Assess, is it the place? And if it satisfies you both, then go ahead.
I like how the example that you gave, John, with the drugs and like how marijuana is almost like a gateway, and then you have like the very hard end to that spectrum. But like I think about it too. If you have someone that is very rigid and only lives by a certain amount of principles, and they stick to that boundary, that box, if it keeps you in that box, if it's your morals or if it's religion, how much experience do you have in the bad game then? How much do you have to tell other people what to stay away from if you have no experience in it?
Right.
So I think it's like, I almost like beg to say like, it's almost a good thing to kind of dabble in the deep end of like the unknown of stuff that like is told or frowned upon for us, because you get to learn stuff that maybe other people don't see or look. Like if you're especially you're from a community that's really sanctioned from like the normal urban area of the city where there's like bars and partying and like you get to experience a lot of life, and you come out of that community that like it's very structured and you do this at this day and you do that tomorrow, it's almost like when you go back to the people that kept you in that structure and you try and teach them the life that and the experience that you've gathered, how do you show that to them? How do you showcase that to them and tell them like, I did these things, but it made me almost, if it doesn't break you, right? Depending on like, it's time and place, because there's stuff that's pushing off the rails. But I think it just begs the question. Like I almost want to say like, it almost kind of makes the person that goes through hard stuff or does stuff that gives them more life experience more of a value to society rather than like a detriment.
If they can swim back though.
Yeah. Because some people get lost, and I think that's like we see is like the homeless problem and like the drug problem here in California. Like that's a clear example.
Well, even like the structure thing. Like for example, like I feel like a lot of people. Okay, let's say like early college culture. Like a lot of people, let's say, come from a very structured background with their parents and like what they're allowed to do. Like their parents, maybe even growing up, like you can't watch these television shows and you got to get like this GPA and like you're doing sports and like curfews at this time. Then they go to college and they're away from mom and dad for the first time. And because they never had experience kind of like testing the waters outside the edge ever, when they go to college, like they go into the deep end, like bad, in a bad way. And they kind of like maybe spin out, where like maybe a kid who like had a little bit less structure kind of tested the boundaries a little bit, like at the appropriate levels at that age, like in high school. And then when they go to college, it's not such like oh my God, like they don't like, they can swim in a deeper end because like they've kind of had experience doing it a little bit going into it, you know?
They took the floaties off.
Yeah, like a training wheel with the bike, you know?
Yeah.
Like same type of shit.
Yeah. So I think if that person that went to the city, like you're saying, Devin, your example, goes back to like their structured neighborhood, like a college kid coming back, and he's like, some people in that community would view that as the bad guy because they've set this. They're the scientific philosopher, right?
Yeah, it's almost.
And philosopher is allowed to. It's not hard, rigid lines. It's blurred lines. You can play around with it.
Yeah, and the structure comes from somewhere. It comes from our parents or their parents or the structure of that community.
Right.
Have done that before, and they want the new adolescents to stay away from it, to maybe put themselves on a higher, greater path that their parents or grandparents didn't reach because they did play the bad game for maybe too long, or they played it at all. They barely played it, and it staggered their growth.
But somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody had to do it in order to come back, swim back, and be like, "Hey, don't do this." Right. So, that's kind of what he's saying here. Is like, be a genuine philosopher. You got to swim to the deep end a little bit. All right. 206. Devin, do you want to read this one? It's pretty short.
Yeah, I can read it. All right. In relation to the genius, that is to say, a being who either engenders or produces, both words understood in their fullest sense, the man of learning, the scientific average man, has always something of the old maid about him. For, like her, he is not conversant with the two principal functions of man. To both, of course, to the scholar and to the old maid, one concedes respectability as if by way of indemnification. In these cases, one emphasizes the respectability, and yet, in the compulsion of this concession, one has the same admixture of fixation. Let us examine more closely what is the scientific man. Firstly, a commonplace type of man with commonplace virtues. That is to say, a non-ruling, non-authoritative, and non-self-sufficient type of man. He possesses industry, patient adaptableness to rank and file, equality and moderation in capacity and requirement. He has the instinct for people like himself and for that which they require. For instance, the portion of independence in green meadow without which there is no rest from labor, the claim to honor and consideration, which first and foremost presupposes recognition and recognizability, the sunshine of a good name, the perpetual ratification of his value and usefulness, with which the inward distrust which lies at the bottom of the heart of all dependent men and gregarious animals has again and again to be overcome. The learned man, as is appropriate, has also maladies and faults of an ignoble kind. He is full of petty envy and has a lynx eye for the weak points in those natures to whose elevations he cannot attain. He is confining, yet only as one who lets himself go, but does not flow. And precisely before the man of the great current, he stands all the colder and more reserved. His eye is then like a smooth and irresponsive lake, which is no longer moved by rapture or sympathy. The worst and most dangerous thing of which a scholar is capable results from the instinct of mediocrity of his type, from the Jesuitism, I don't know how to say that. Jesuitism of mediocrity. Mediocrity. What is that? Am I saying mediocrity? That's a looks weird. Which labors instinctively for the destruction of the exceptional man and endeavors to break, or still better, to relax every bent bow, to relax, of course, with consideration and naturally with an indulgent hand, to relax with confiding sympathy. That is the real art of Jesuitism, which has always understood how to introduce itself as the religion of sympathy.
You know, anybody know what Jesuitism is?
Yeah, they're witches.
You Jesuit.
Catholic religious order. Jesuits refers to principles, practices, or systems, or system of the Society of Jesus. Society of Jesus. What is that?
What, dude? You're not a member of the Society of Jesus?
A religious order of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, let's see.
The Jesuits.
The Jesuits. All right. Let's see here. Who's got a stab at it? Who's going to try it?
Not a
Beat us through.
All right. All right. You want the main points or the summary?
Summary.
Summary? Okay. Nietzsche explores the fundamental difference between the genius and the average scientific man. While the genius creates new values and realities, the learned man merely conserves, imitates, or comments on the work of others. Nietzsche likens the scientific average man to an old maid, evoking sterility, timidity, and a lack of generative power. He acknowledges that the scientific man often possesses virtues, such as patience, industriousness, or orderliness, but insists these are compensations for his inability to create. The learned
So he said, "You can't make shit, dog."
Yeah, but they can possess all those virtues, but they still can't create. The learned man gains respect, yet Nietzsche claims this often comes with resentment, pettiness, and a cold eye that can only critique but not aspire.
He's like a movie critic or like a song critic. He's like, the tempo should be this. It's like, well, fucking go make a banger then if you're so good at fucking critiquing music.
Right. Exactly. So they end up developing into this person that becomes like a super critic. Like I know people like that. Like they're really smart folk, but like
it's just
it's
just the classic. Like I saw like people like music critics like will take like a hit song and they're like, let me tell you why it's actually not a good song. And like they're like music professors at college. It's like, okay, if you're so smart, don't make a hit song then. If it's like so like whatever, like who gives a shit? I don't know.
It's a science. If it's a science, go do it. Just follow this. Right. All right. So worst of all, the scholar is infected by the instinct of mediocrity, which seeks to pull down greatness and difference. Nietzsche's concern is that such a spirit, whether under the name of science or religion, works subtly and powerfully to flatten all human experience in favor of comfort, order, and safety.
No good.
That's the scientific man.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they have an instinct of mediocrity where everybody has to be equal, right? And he's concerned that type of mentality or morality, whether it's from science or religion, flattens humans' experience in order to keep everybody comfortable and in order.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Scientific is very uniform.
All right. I mean, I think that's it.
And the non-scientific man is almost like a cuck.
Never he is. The guy that's in the game, whatever he's got, game it.
Just the way he like gave the title of like a maid to like the non-scientific. It's like,
well, they can't birth any kids.
You say you can't get it up, dog.
You can't create anything. All right. 207. I can read this one and then we'll rock, paper, scissors for 208. That's a big old play. All right. Aphorism 207. However gratefully one may welcome the objective spirit, and who has not been sick to death of all subjectivity and its confounded ipsismosity, which, before we even continue, ipsismosity is a state of being intensely connected to one's true self. In the end, however, one must learn caution, even with regard to one's gratitude, and put a stop to the exaggeration with which the unselfing and depersonalizing of the spirit has recently been celebrated, as if it were the goal in itself, as if it were salvation and glorification, as is especially accustomed to happen in the pessimist school, which has also, in its turn, good reasons for paying the highest honors to disinterested knowledge. The objective man, who no longer curses and scolds like the pessimist, the ideal man of learning in whom the scientific instinct blossoms forth fully after a thousand complete and partial failures, is assuredly one of the most costly instruments to exist, or that exists. But his place is in the hand of one who is more powerful. He is only an instrument. We may say he is a mirror. He is no purpose in himself. The objective man is in truth a mirror accustomed to prostration before everything that wants to be known, with such desires only as knowing or reflecting implies. He waits until something comes and then expands himself sensitively, so that even the light footsteps and gliding paths of spiritual beings may not be lost on his surface and film. Whatever personality he still possesses seems to him accidental, arbitrary, or still oftener disturbing. So much has he come to regard himself as the passage and reflection of outside forms and events, he calls up the recollection of himself with an effort, and not infrequently wrongly. He readily confounds himself with other persons. He makes mistakes with regard to his own needs, and here only is he unrefined and negligent. Perhaps he is troubled about the health or the pettiness and confined atmosphere of wife and friend, or the lack of companions in society. Indeed, he sets himself to reflect on his suffering, but in vain. His thoughts already rove away to the more general case, and tomorrow he knows as little as he knew yesterday how to help himself. He does not now take himself seriously and devote time to himself. He is serene, not from lack of trouble, but from lack of capacity for grasping and dealing with his trouble. The habitual complacence with respect to all objects and experiences, the radiant and impartial hospitality with which he receives everything that comes his way, his habit of inconsiderate good nature, of dangerous indifference as to yea and nay. Alas, there are enough of cases in which he has to atone for these virtues of his, and as man generally, he becomes far too easily the caput mortem of such virtues. Shall one wish love or hatred from him? I mean love and hatred as God, woman, and animal understand them. He will do what he can and furnish what he can. But one must not be surprised if it should not be much. If he should show himself just at this point to be false, fragile, questionable, and deteriorated, his love is constrained, his hatred is artificial, and rather un tour de force, a slight ostentation and exaggeration. He is only genuine so far as he can be objective. Only in his serene totality is he still nature and natural. His mirroring and eternally self-polishing soul no longer knows how to affirm, no longer how to deny. He does not command, neither does he destroy. Je ne méprise presque rien, he says with Leibniz. Let us not overlook nor undervalue the presque. Neither is he a model man. He does not go in advance of anyone, nor after either. He places himself generally too far off to have any reason for espousing the cause of either good or evil. If he has been so long confounded with the philosopher, with the Caesarean trainer and dictator of civilization, he has had far too much honor, and what is more essential in him has been overlooked. He is an instrument, something of a slave, though certainly the sublimest sort of slave, but nothing in himself. Presque rien. The objective man is an instrument, a costly, easily injured, easily tarnished measuring instrument and mirroring apparatus, which is to be taken care of and respected. But he is no goal, no outgoing nor upgoing, no complementary man in whom the rest of existence justifies itself, no termination, and still less of a commencement, an engendering or primary cause, nothing hardy, powerful, self-centered, that wants to be a master, but rather only a soft, inflated, delicate, movable potter's form that must wait for some kind of content and frame to shape itself thereto. For the most part, a man without frame and content, a selfless man. Consequently, also nothing for women. In parentheses.
Okay, that right there, that end, I think that sums it up really good. What?
Brutal, right? Not even the women, bro.
No, not the women part, but like them talking about how like these utilitarians or whatever, like these people, like at the end of the day, all they are is nothing more than a piece of clay that is like waiting to mimic something that it can identify. Where like there's no spark. Like if your only driving factor is objectivity, there's no such thing as like a spark of like creativity, of love, of passion. And like the women thing, I think he's saying like he's, well, maybe I took that the wrong way. I thought that was him saying that like he's like boring to women, or he has nothing to get to he has nothing to like nothing to like impress them with or whatever, because like maybe I took that wrong.
He says that even earlier in the aphorism where he says, should one love or hate him, he will do what he can and furnish what he can, but one must not be surprised if it's not much.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, it's like there's no spark, like there's no romanticism. Like part of love is kind of like art in a way of like you notice something about the person. Like how can I like that's how you make like love fun and interesting. Like love isn't utilitarian or objective. It like that's one of the things beyond good and evil. So
Right.
like he's like these people are just useful tools, but like they got no master. It's like what's the point? Like
Yeah, they're just reflecting whatever's in front of them.
yeah, and they're just waiting to reflect. But like there's nothing ever of value. There's nothing ever of new value coming from them or substantial takes from them or like any sort of like anything he's like that I could learn or like take them as interesting because all they ever do is just like mimic what's already ever been.
Yeah. I mean, objective doesn't always mean correct, right?
Objective isn't like funny. Like making a joke is funny. Like I don't know. Like there was this.
It can be.
No, the spark of making a joke of tying the two together. Like I guess you can mimic a joke framework and then be funny.
Story, you can be
I guess you could, but it's the spark of like being witty. I guess of like making a joke on the fly. Like that's what makes people funny. Is like they're not mimicking like a guy's set or mimicking like a joke framework. Like they just take like the things that are happening all right now and they're able to like make it funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like we ran into this person and like he had a beard and he was babyface, I guess prior, and he was talking about he's like, yeah, I'm still so surprised that like even I had a beard. And I was like, well, I mean, I was like your balls have to drop sometime, right?
Right.
Like that's just like a joke, like I guess it's objective, but like but like
I think the interesting thing for me to the takeaway was like he defined the objective man as a piece of a potter's clay, not yet.
that's what
right.
Yeah.
And so like
but it can be formed,
it is formed, right? And that's what he's also saying with the mirrors. It takes on any form.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Objective doesn't mean correct, right? Like their objective means I can observe it and I can confirm it for myself, right?
Yeah.
But objective changes over time. The earth being flat was objective at one point.
Okay, sure.
Right? So objective changes over time. So if you're an objective man, you're going to change over time and you're just a mirror or you're a mold, you're a piece of clay that it's molded, but it's never firmed up. It can just be retrashed and turned into something else.
And like he talks about like them being a tool and like, cause there's high value in being objective, but like, again, it's like, it's not the driving factor, like
active. Let's be real. Like if you were only objective, you never like had a subjective idea.
For sure.
You would be bland,
For sure. But the lack of objectivity would be like maybe total chaos,
Yeah, there's a balance for sure.
So like you need to be objective, but it can't be like the thing driving the car. It can be
Right.
it's like your co-pilot. Like objectivity is like in the passenger seat with you, being like, hey, check out stop sign, cop. Right. But like you're like, I have a destination,
Right.
I'm going somewhere.
It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm going somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice. All right. We're rock, paper, scissors for fucking.
No, nose game, not it.
I'll do it. Rock, paper, scissors is better, dude. That would have been a better moment.
Nah, bro, David got it, bro.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies. Oh, I gotta listen to this whole thing.
A popcorn?
All right.
Maybe I'll mute myself and get a certain idea.
Aphorism 208. When a philosopher nowadays makes known that he is not a skeptic, I hope that has been gathered from the foregoing description of the objective spirit. People all hear it impatiently. They regard him on that account with some apprehension. They would like to ask so many, many questions. Indeed, among timid hearers, of whom there are now so many, he is henceforth said to be dangerous. With his repudiation of skepticism, it seems to them as if they heard some evil threatening sound in the distance, as if a new kind of explosive were being tried somewhere. A dynamite of the spirit, perhaps a newly discovered Russian nihilum, a pessimism bone voluntatis, that not only means denial, but dreadful thought, practices denial. Against this kind of goodwill, a will to the veritable, actual negation of life, There is, as is generally acknowledged nowadays, no better soporific and sedative than skepticism, the mild, pleasing, lulling poppy of skepticism. And Hamlet himself is now prescribed by the doctors of the day as an antidote to the spirit and its underground noises. Are not our ears already full of bad sounds? Say the skeptics, as lovers of repose, and almost as kind of safety police. This subterranean neigh is terrible. Be still, ye pessimistic moles. The skeptic, in effect, that delicate creature, is far too easily frightened. His conscience is schooled as to start at every nay, and even at the sharp, decided yea, and feels something like a bite thereby. Yea and nay, they seem to him opposed to morality. He loves, on the contrary, to make a festival to his virtue by a noble aloofness, while perhaps he says with Montaigne, what do I know? Or with Socrates, I know that I know nothing. Or here, I do not trust myself, no door is open to me. Or, even if the door were open, why should I enter immediately? Or, what is the use of any hasty hypothesis? It might quite well be in good taste to make no hypothesis at all. Are you absolutely obliged to straighten at once what is crooked? To stuff every hole with some kind of oakum? Is there not time enough for that? Has not the time leisure? Oh, ye demons, can you not at all wait? The uncertain also has its charms. The Sphinx, too, is a Circe, and a Circe, too, was a philosopher. Thus does a skeptic console himself, and in truth he needs some consolation. For skepticism is the most spiritual expression of a certain many-sided physiological temperament, which in ordinary language is called nervous debility and sickliness. It arises whenever races or classes which have been long separated decisively and suddenly blend with one another. In the new generation, which has inherited, as it were, different standards and valuations in its blood, everything is disquiet, derangement, doubt, and tentativeness. The best powers operate restrictively. The very virtues prevent each other growing and becoming strong. Equilibrium, ballast, and perpendicular stability are lacking in body and soul. That, however, which is most diseased and degenerated in such nondescripts is the will. They are no longer familiar with independence of decision or the courageous feeling of pleasure in willing. They are doubtful of the freedom of the will. Even in their dreams, our present-day Europe, the scene of senselessness, precipitate attempt at a radical blending of classes and consequently of races, is there skeptical in all its heights and depths, sometimes exhibiting the mobile skepticism which springs impatiently and wantonly from branch to branch, sometimes with gloomy aspect, like a cloud overcharged with interrogative signs, and often sick unto death of its will. Paralysis of will, where do we not find this cripple sitting nowadays? And yet how bedecked, oftentimes, how seductively ornamented, there are the finest gala dresses and disguises for this disease, and that, for instance, most of what places itself nowadays in the showcases as objectiveness and the scientific spirit, le part pour l'art, and pure voluntary knowledge, is only decked out skepticism and paralysis of will. I am ready to answer for this diagnosis of the European disease. The disease of the will is diffused unequally over Europe. It is worst and most varied where civilization has longest prevailed. It decreases according as the barbarian still, or again, asserts his claims under the loose drapery of Western culture. It is therefore in the France of today, as can be readily disclosed and comprehended, that the will is most infirm, and France, which has always had a masterly aptitude for converting even the portentous crisis of its spirit into something charming and seductive, now manifests emphatically its intellectual ascendancy over Europe, by being the school and exhibition of all the charms of skepticism. The power to will and to persist, moreover, in a resolution, is already somewhat stronger in Germany, and again in the north of Germany, it is stronger than in central Germany. It is considerably stronger in England, Spain, and Corsica, associated with phlegm in the former and with hard skulls in the latter. Not to mention Italy, which is too young yet to know what it wants, and must first show whether it can exercise will, but it is strongest and most surprising of all in the immense Middle Empire where Europe, as it were, flows back to Asia, namely in Russia. There the power to will has been long stored up and accumulated. There, the will, uncertain whether to be negative or affirmative, waits threateningly to be discharged. To borrow their pet phrase from our physicists, perhaps not only Indian wars and complications in Asia would be necessary to free Europe from its greatest danger, but also internal subversion, the shattering of the empire into small states, and above all the introduction of parliamentary imbecility, together with the obligation of every one to read his newspaper at breakfast. I do not say this as one who desires it. In my heart, I should rather prefer the contrary. I mean, such an increase in the threatening attitude of Russia that Europe would have to make up its mind to become equally threatening, namely to acquire one will, by means of a new caste to rule over the continent, a persistent, dreadful will of its own, that can set its aims thousands of years ahead, so that the long spun-out comedy of its petty statism and its dynastic, as well as its democratic many-willedness, might finally be brought to a close. The time for petty politics is past. The next century will bring the struggle for the dominion of the world, the compulsions of great politics.
That's probably the longest one we've done yet.
That was long.
Lead us through. Anybody want to take a stab before we jump into that? No? Okay. So he's critiquing the cultural dominance of skepticism, which he sees not as a noble doubt, but as a spiritual sickness, a form of paralysis of the will. In his time, a philosopher who claims not to be a skeptic is treated with suspicion, as if they are dangerous or subversive. This is because skepticism became the default attitude of the intellectual and cultural elite, especially in France, where Nietzsche sees it manifested in charming but ultimately hollow forms of intellectualism. Yeah, France has a way of spinning things. He describes skepticism as a defensive retreat from life, dressed up in the ideals of objectivity, pure knowledge, and academic modesty. But behind this mask lies a fear of commitment, of choosing, of acting. The skeptic avoids both affirmation and negation, drowning in a sea of cautious detachment. Nietzsche warns that this attitude is not harmless. It corrodes strength, unity, and the capacity to will anything of consequence. So skepticism is like the sickness, the symptom of this scientific philosopher. At the end, Nietzsche envisions a coming transformation. He predicts the rise of a new caste, one that possesses a unified and dreadful will, capable of reshaping the political and spiritual direction of the world. This new force, potentially centered in Russia, will bring an end to the fragmented, indecisive, petty statism of modern Europe and usher in an era of great politics driven by necessity and strength of will.
Were you talking about communism?
I hope not. Unified community, dreadful will. Maybe he is.
When I hear dreadful will, I think of progressivism. And then he says Russia. So Marxism is the father of progressivism. So
yeah, what was the political climate in like 1880s in Russia?
The Bolsheviks? No, I don't know.
For sure. Let's see.
They still had the Tsar and shit. That's for sure.
That was a Tsar. So at that time, Alexander II. Let's see.
Yeah.
So they're shifted to Alexander III, which was a suppression of political opposition, a return to traditional autocratic rule, and a rise of nationalism and anti-Semitism.
Classic, really.
Really.
Our country's great. Get them out of here. Every country goes through it.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Take us out of here.
All right. Before we do, though, what do you guys think of this chapter so far? Really interesting. It's like, are you interested in learning about the scholars of the time?
I kind of like some of the points he's making and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit lost sometimes.
Yep.
Maybe I'm a product of my era, but I like the short thoughts because I can like take it, consume it, digest it, talk about it, put handles on it, whatever you want to call it. This stuff, I'm like, blah blah blah. I'm reading it. Don't get me wrong, but it's a lot to kind of take in, and kind of like be like, what's the whole thing he's getting at? Because he touches on like 5 things on like one thing, you know. But yeah. I mean, he's just free talking, so it makes sense.
That's the thing I struggle with. At least this past section we read, we're thinking a little bit. Even the past 5 sections, like I find myself just getting lost. I'm like,
yeah,
What's the what is he talking about?
So what's he even talking about?
Goes through. He does like a thread that goes through every idea that like connects them.
Yeah.
To find the thread back to the last idea. That part right there is what kind of makes it kind of hard because there's so many, like literally 5 maybe, And then he purposely makes it hard. He said it himself.
True.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to take us out of here. Thank you guys so much for joining us on today's episode. We read aphorism 204 to 208. If you think we missed anything, drop that down in the comment section below. I'm sure we did. Love to hear from you. Before you take off, make sure to hit the little subscribe button, hit the bell next to it, and follow us on all our social media platforms. All you need will be down in the description box below. Thanks so much for your time. And remember, you are now equals who you'll be tomorrow. Peace.